Take control of your life, my dear, because this moment right here may be the turning point you have been quietly praying for without even realizing it. I want you to pause for a second. Just pause, take a slow breath in, and let it go gently. There is no rush here, no pressure, no race you must win before the clock runs out. Just you and this moment together. Now let me ask you something honestly. How long have you been waiting for your life to finally feel like yours? Not the life everyone expected from you, not the version of yourself built out of survival, fear, exhaustion, or disappointment. I mean your real life, the one your soul has been whispering about in quiet moments, the one you can almost feel late at night when everything becomes silent and your heart starts asking questions your mind is too afraid to answer. Because I know something about you already. You are tired of carrying a version of yourself that no longer fits. You are tired of waking up with invisible heaviness in your chest, tired of wondering when things will finally change, tired of believing you must wait for permission before becoming who you truly are. And, sweetheart, I need you to hear me carefully when I say this. Your breakthrough does not begin when the outside world changes. It begins the moment you decide you are no longer abandoning yourself. That is the real turning point. Not money arriving, not someone choosing you, not circumstances suddenly becoming perfect, not the universe magically dropping answers into your lap. The turning point begins quietly, internally, invisibly. It begins the moment you stop speaking to yourself like someone who has already lost. Take another breath, because I know there were moments when life made you feel powerless. Maybe people dismissed your dreams. Maybe disappointment trained you to expect less. Maybe you learned to survive by shrinking yourself, staying quiet, settling, overgiving, overthinking, apologizing for your existence. And slowly, without noticing, you began waiting for life to happen to you instead of through you. But my dear, you were never created merely to react to life. You were created to participate in it consciously. And I know that word consciously sounds simple, but it changes everything. Because most people live like leaves in the wind. They wake up already defeated by yesterday. They repeat the same emotional patterns, the same fears, the same assumptions. They expect tomorrow to mirror today because internally nothing has shifted. But you are here because something inside you is waking up. Something inside you no longer wants to live on autopilot. And maybe that awakening feels uncomfortable right now. Maybe it feels confusing. Maybe old relationships feel strange. Maybe your old routines feel empty. Maybe you keep asking yourself, why can't I keep pretending anymore? Because your soul is asking for expansion. And expansion almost always feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing. A seed does not break open because something went wrong. It breaks open because something beautiful is trying to emerge. Do you understand? Sometimes the breaking is the beginning. Sometimes confusion is the doorway. Sometimes endings are sacred preparation. Sometimes the life you are crying over losing was never aligned with the person you are becoming. And I know how painful transition periods can feel. There is a lonely space between the old version of you and the new version of you, a space where you no longer fit into your past, but you cannot fully see your future either. That space can feel terrifying, but it is also holy, because that is where transformation happens. Not when everything feels certain, not when everyone applauds you, not when results appear instantly. Transformation happens in the unseen. Like roots growing beneath the soil. Nobody claps for roots, my dear. Nobody sees them, yet they are the reason the tree survives storms later. And perhaps this season of your life has been about roots. Not punishment, not delay, not failure. Preparation. I want you to think about how often you have measured your worth based on visible outcomes. If it hasn't happened yet, maybe I'm not good enough. If they left me, maybe I'm unlovable. If I failed, maybe I'm not meant for greatness. If I'm still struggling, maybe life forgot about me. Sweetheart, no. A flower does not question its worth during winter. It understands timing instinctively. And what if your life is asking you to learn the same trust? Not passive waiting, not giving up, but deep trust. The kind of trust that says, even now, something is unfolding for me, because it is. Even in this moment, your inner world is shaping your future more than you realize. Your thoughts matter. Your emotional state matters. The way you speak to yourself matters. You cannot continuously tell yourself you are broken and expect to feel powerful. You cannot constantly rehearse fear and expect peace to grow inside you. You cannot repeatedly abandon your own needs and expect fulfillment to magically appear. Everything begins within. Everything. And that truth can feel overwhelming at first because it means responsibility, but it is also liberating because it means your power was never outside of you to begin with. Take a breath and really feel that. Your power was never outside of you, not in another person, not in approval, not in perfect timing, not in circumstances, not in validation. It has always been waiting within your awareness. This is why two people can experience the same situation and respond completely differently. One collapses, one grows stronger, one sees rejection, one sees redirection, one sees failure. One sees refinement. The event is not always what shapes the future. The identity does. And this is where your life begins to change, my dear. Not when you obsess over, when will my breakthrough arrive? But when you ask, who am I becoming while I wait? Because if you become someone who deeply trusts themselves, someone emotionally grounded, someone who knows their worth, someone who speaks life into themselves, someone who no longer betrays their own soul, then breakthroughs stop being accidents. They become natural extensions of who you are. Most people try to create a new life while emotionally remaining the same person. They want abundance while rehearsing scarcity, love while rehearsing rejection, peace while rehearsing anxiety, confidence while rehearsing self-criticism. But the outer world often mirrors the inner state you continuously practice. And I know that may sound intimidating, but do not turn this into another reason to judge yourself. This is not about perfection. It is about awareness, gentle awareness, the kind where you begin noticing your patterns with compassion instead of shame. Maybe you notice how often you expect disappointment before anything even happens. Maybe you notice how uncomfortable you feel receiving compliments. Maybe you notice how quickly you talk yourself out of your dreams. Maybe you notice how your body has become addicted to stress because stress once helped you survive. That awareness is powerful. Because what you can observe, you can slowly transform. And transformation is not violence against yourself. It is love, real love, not the performative kind, not the conditional kind. Not the kind that says, "I'll love myself once I finally succeed." No, transformation says, "I will meet myself with compassion while I grow." Sweetheart, you do not bloom by hating yourself into becoming better. You bloom through safety, through patience, through inner gentleness. A frightened nervous system cannot hear the whispers of possibility clearly. That is why slowing down matters. I know the world glorifies rushing, constant productivity, endless striving, chasing, forcing, pushing. But peace does not grow well in urgency. And some of you have spent so long surviving that resting feels dangerous. You sit still and suddenly guilt appears. You relax and your mind searches for problems. You experience joy and immediately wait for something bad to happen. That is not weakness. That is conditioning. Your body learned survival before it learned safety. So now, part of your healing journey is teaching yourself that peace is safe too. Not just struggle, not just chaos, not just emotional exhaustion. Peace is safe. Receiving is safe. Being supported is safe. Take another breath. Can you imagine how different your life would feel if you stopped waking up expecting disappointment? Can you imagine what would happen if, instead of scanning for what might go wrong, you began opening emotionally to what might finally go right? That shift changes everything because your energy begins leading differently. You start making calmer decisions. You stop chasing people who cannot see your value. You stop abandoning your intuition. You stop speaking about yourself like someone temporary. You stop treating your dreams like inconveniences. And slowly, life responds. Not because the universe is punishing or rewarding you like some distant authority figure, but because your inner state changes what you notice, allow, choose, tolerate, and attract. A person who believes they deserve peace behaves differently than someone convinced they deserve pain. And maybe nobody ever taught you that your emotional identity shapes your reality. Maybe you were taught only to endure. But my dear, you are allowed to create. You are allowed to choose differently. And I know some part of you fears that if you truly step into your power, people may misunderstand you, some may leave, some may become uncomfortable with your growth. That happens sometimes. Because your transformation forces others to confront the places where they remain asleep within themselves. But do not shrink to maintain old comfort. Do not dim your becoming to preserve familiarity. You were not born merely to repeat cycles. You were born to awaken beyond them. So tonight, or this morning, or wherever you are listening from, I want you to place your hand gently over your heart and just breathe. No pressure to fix your entire life tonight. No pressure to have every answer. No pressure to become a completely new person by tomorrow. Just breathe and quietly say to yourself, I am allowed to begin again. Feel those words. I am allowed to begin again. Not because you failed, but because you are evolving, and evolution requires release. Trees release leaves. The sky releases storms. The ocean releases waves. And you, my dear, are allowed to release old identities too. The exhausted version, the fearful version, the constantly apologizing version, the version that believes survival was the highest form of living. You are becoming someone new now, someone softer perhaps, but stronger too. someone calmer, someone more intentional, someone who no longer begs life for permission to exist fully. That is your breakthrough, not someday, now. In this awareness, in this decision, in this return to yourself, take another slow breath for me, sweetheart, because I know something tender is happening inside you right now. Part of you is beginning to remember who you were before fear became your normal language. And that remembering can feel emotional. It can feel almost unfamiliar, because when someone has lived in survival mode for a long time, peace can feel strange at first. Stillness can feel uncomfortable. Hope can even feel risky. But my dear, this is how healing often begins. Quietly, not with fireworks, not with instant answers, not with dramatic external change, but with a subtle internal shift where you suddenly realize, I don't want to keep living against myself anymore. That realization changes everything. Because for so long, maybe you believed your life was happening to you. Maybe you thought your circumstances held all the power. Maybe you waited for someone else to rescue you emotionally, to validate you, to choose you, to finally give you permission to feel worthy. But the deeper truth is this. Your life begins transforming the moment you stop handing your identity to external conditions. Take a breath and really sit with that. How many years have you spent allowing temporary moments to define permanent beliefs about yourself? One rejection became, I'm not lovable. One mistake became, I always fail. One delay became, nothing good happens for me. One heartbreak became, I can't trust love. And slowly, without realizing it, those painful moments became inner stories you repeated every day. Not because you wanted suffering, not because you were weak, but because the mind repeats what feels familiar. Even pain can become familiar. Especially if you learned early in life that love had conditions attached to it, that safety could disappear suddenly, that approval needed to be earned, that rest meant laziness, that vulnerability was dangerous. The body remembers these things, sweetheart. Your nervous system remembers. That is why healing is not simply thinking positive. It is deeper than that, softer than that, more compassionate than that. Healing is teaching your entire being that you no longer have to live as if danger is always around the corner. And I know that may sound simple, but for many people, it becomes the breakthrough of a lifetime. Because there are people walking through life carrying invisible alarms inside them every single day, always bracing, always anticipating disappointment, always expecting abandonment, always preparing emotionally for things to fall apart. And when you live like that long enough, you stop realizing how exhausting it truly is. You become accustomed to emotional tension, but your soul was never designed to live permanently clenched. You were designed to breathe deeply, to create, to connect, to receive joy without guilt, to trust yourself again. And maybe that word trust feels complicated for you, because perhaps life taught you that trusting leads to pain. But let me tell you something gently. The answer is not to stop trusting entirely. The answer is to rebuild trust with yourself first. Because when you trust yourself, everything changes. You stop abandoning your intuition just to keep others comfortable. You stop saying yes when your spirit is screaming no. You stop betraying your own needs to avoid rejection. You stop settling for crumbs while pretending they are enough. Self-trust is sacred, and it grows slowly, like sunlight returning after a long winter. Not instantly, not perfectly, but steadily. Maybe your breakthrough right now is not about becoming louder. Maybe it is about becoming more honest with yourself, honest about what drains you, honest about what hurts, honest about what you truly desire, honest about the fact that some versions of your life no longer fit the person you are becoming. And I know release can feel painful. People often speak about transformation as if it is glamorous all the time, but real transformation asks you to let go of identities that once protected you. The overachiever who tied worth to productivity, the caretaker who neglected themselves while saving everyone else, the people pleaser who feared disappointing others, the version of you who believed struggle made you valuable. Those identities once helped you survive, so do not hate them. Thank them gently, then let them rest. Because you do not need to continue carrying survival patterns into a future that requires expansion. Imagine carrying heavy winter coats into the middle of summer. At some point, what once protected you begins overheating you. And emotionally, that happens too. Some coping mechanisms that once kept you safe eventually begin blocking your growth. Overthinking, emotional numbness, constant self-doubt, avoidance, perfectionism, fear of visibility, fear of failure, even fear of success. Yes, sweetheart, some people fear success more than failure, because success changes identity, and identity shifts can feel terrifying when the nervous system associates change with instability. That is why sometimes people sabotage beautiful opportunities without even realizing it. They delay, they shrink, they procrastinate, they pull away from healthy love. They question every good thing entering their lives. Not because they truly want suffering, but because suffering feels familiar, and what is familiar often feels safer than what is possible. Take a slow breath. This is why your inner world matters so deeply. Not because you must control every thought perfectly, but because awareness allows choice. When you notice yourself expecting disappointment, you can pause gently and say, "Ah, there is the old fear again." Not with shame, with compassion, because healing is not a war against yourself. It is a reunion with yourself. And sweetheart, I think some part of you has been disconnected from your own heart for a very long time. Not intentionally, just gradually. Life became responsibilities. Stress became routine. Survival became identity. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking yourself simple questions like, what do I actually need? What feels true to me? What kind of life would nourish my spirit? What would happen if I stopped shrinking? Those questions matter. Because breakthroughs are rarely random events. They are usually the result of internal permission finally being granted. Permission to rest. Permission to dream bigger. Permission to leave what harms you. Permission to receive more. Permission to stop apologizing for existing. And perhaps this season of your life is not asking you to force outcomes. Perhaps it is asking you to become emotionally available for the life you keep saying you want. That changes everything. Because many people ask for abundance while emotionally rehearsing lack every day. They ask for love while remaining emotionally unavailable. They ask for peace while feeding chaos internally. They ask for transformation while clinging tightly to old identities. But life responds to congruence, to alignment. When your inner world and outer desires begin speaking the same language, movement happens. Not always instantly, but naturally, like a river finally flowing without resistance. So, instead of obsessing over timelines, try asking yourself something softer. If my breakthrough were already unfolding, how would I treat myself today? Would you still speak cruelly to yourself? Would you still constantly rush? Would you still ignore your body's exhaustion? Would you still cling to people who cannot meet you with care? Would you still postpone your joy until some imaginary future moment? Or would you begin living differently now? This is the secret many people miss. The future version of you is created through repeated emotional choices in the present. Tiny choices. The way you speak to yourself in the mirror. The way you breathe when anxiety rises. The way you respond to setbacks. The boundaries you finally honor. The moments you choose rest instead of self-punishment. These moments seem small, but they are building identity quietly. And identity creates reality over time. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine planting a seed underground. Every morning you water it gently. You care for it. You trust the process, even though nothing visible appears immediately. Now imagine digging the seed up every day asking, why aren't you growing yet? That constant panic interrupts the process. And emotionally, many people do this to themselves constantly. They never allow inner transformation to root because they keep measuring progress only through immediate external proof. But real breakthroughs often begin invisibly. A calmer reaction, a healthier boundary, a deeper sense of worth, a moment of unexpected peace, a decision not to abandon yourself again. These are signs, sacred signs. Do not underestimate subtle change. Sometimes the quietest shifts create the loudest transformations later. And I know part of you still wonders, but what if it never happens for me? Sweetheart, what if your life changes the moment you stop believing you are excluded from beautiful things? What if you are not behind? What if you are not forgotten? What if this entire season has been preparing your inner foundation? Because a fragile foundation cannot sustain a powerful future. And maybe life has been strengthening you emotionally before expanding you externally. That is love too, even when it does not feel comfortable. A tree with shallow roots cannot survive strong winds. So perhaps your soul has been learning depth, patience, self-awareness, emotional resilience, discernment, self-respect. Not to punish you, but to prepare you for a life you will actually be able to sustain. Take another deep breath. I want you to relax your shoulders for a moment. Unclench your jaw, soften your chest. You do not need to carry the future all at once. You only need this moment. And in this moment, I want you to silently repeat these words with me. I am no longer fighting myself. I am learning to trust my own becoming. I do not need to rush my healing. What is meant for me will not require me to abandon myself. I am safe to grow. I am safe to receive. I am safe to begin again. Feel those words slowly, not as empty affirmations, but as emotional nourishment, because your subconscious listens carefully to the language you repeat most often. And for years, maybe your inner dialogue sounded like fear. I'm not enough. I'll probably fail. Nothing works out for me. I always get hurt. My dear, those words become emotional environments, and your body lives inside those environments every day. So now, gently, lovingly, patiently, you are creating a new inner environment, one rooted in compassion, one rooted in possibility, one rooted in trust, not blind fantasy, not denial, but grounded hope. The kind that says, even if I cannot see everything yet, I believe something beautiful is still unfolding for me. That belief matters more than you realize, because hopelessness closes doors internally before life even has a chance to open them externally. But hope softens the nervous system. Hope reopens imagination. Hope creates emotional space for miracles to enter. And maybe your greatest breakthrough will not be becoming someone completely different. Maybe it will simply be returning to the truth of who you always were beneath the fear. Take one more deep breath with me, my dear, slowly, gently, and notice that you are still here, after everything life has asked you to carry, after every disappointment that tried to harden your heart, after all the moments you doubted yourself. You are still here, and that matters more than you know. Because sometimes people think strength looks loud. They think transformation must arrive dramatically, all at once, like lightning splitting the sky. But often, true transformation is much quieter than that. It looks like choosing not to give up on yourself one more day. It looks like speaking kindly to yourself after years of criticism. It looks like resting without guilt. It looks like allowing yourself to imagine a future beyond survival. It looks like finally realizing that your worth was never something you had to earn through suffering. Sweetheart, that realization alone can change an entire life. For so long, maybe you believed pain was proof of value. Maybe you thought you had to struggle endlessly to deserve good things. Maybe deep down you carried the belief that ease belonged to other people but not to you. And because of that belief, you kept overextending yourself emotionally. You kept proving, performing, enduring, giving pieces of yourself away, hoping one day you would finally feel enough. But listen to me carefully now. You do not have to exhaust yourself to deserve love. You do not have to break yourself to deserve rest. You do not have to constantly suffer to justify your existence. You are already worthy, even now, even healing, even uncertain, even unfinished, especially unfinished, because life is not asking you to become perfect. It is asking you to become present. Present enough to notice how often fear has narrated your story. Present enough to recognize the moments you abandon yourself emotionally. Present enough to choose differently little by little. And I know that choosing differently sounds simple until you actually try to do it. Because healing challenges familiar identities. There may be days when the old version of you tries to return. The anxious version, the fearful version, the version addicted to overthinking, the version that expects rejection before connection, the version that apologizes for taking up space. And when that happens, please do not panic. It does not mean you failed. Healing is not linear, sweetheart. A flower does not bloom once and remain untouched by weather forever. There will still be rainy days, moments of doubt, moments when old fears whisper loudly again. But now you are becoming aware, and awareness changes everything. Because before, You may have become consumed by those thoughts without questioning them, but now there is space between you and the fear. Now you can pause and gently ask yourself, is this thought truly mine? Or is this an old wound speaking? Is this fear protecting me or limiting me? That pause is powerful. That pause is where conscious living begins. And conscious living is not about controlling every outcome. It is about no longer allowing unconscious fear to lead your entire life. Take a slow breath. I want you to think about how much energy you have spent trying to predict pain before it arrives, preparing for disappointment, imagining worst-case scenarios, rehearsing rejection, expecting things to fall apart. That constant anticipation creates exhaustion inside the body, because the nervous system cannot always distinguish between an imagined threat and a real one. So even when danger is not present, your body may still react as though it is. That is why some people feel tired all the time. Why rest does not always feel restful. Why peace can feel unfamiliar. Their body has forgotten how to soften. But my dear, softness is not weakness. Softness is openness. Softness is trust. Softness is emotional flexibility. Softness is the courage to remain tender in a world that often rewards emotional armor. And I know armor once protected you. Maybe you stopped expressing your needs because nobody listened before. Maybe you stopped trusting because betrayal wounded you deeply. Maybe you stopped dreaming because disappointment became too painful. But there comes a moment in healing where the armor that once protected you begins preventing intimacy, joy, creativity, and expansion from reaching you. And perhaps this is your moment, your turning point. The moment you realize that protecting yourself from pain has also been protecting you from life itself. Because when fear leads your life, you may avoid rejection, but you also avoid possibility. You avoid disappointment, but you also avoid connection. You avoid vulnerability, but you also avoid deep love. Fear promises safety while quietly shrinking your world. But your soul wants more than survival. Your soul wants aliveness. It wants mornings where you wake up without dread sitting heavily on your chest. It wants relationships where you do not have to beg for basic care. It wants work that does not slowly disconnect you from yourself. It wants peace that does not depend entirely on external conditions. And yes, that kind of life is possible for you. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you become rooted within yourself differently. A deeply rooted tree still experiences storms, but it no longer fears every gust of wind. That is emotional stability. Not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of inner grounding. And grounding is something you can begin cultivating every single day, not through punishment, not through forcing positivity, but through gentle daily awareness. Maybe tomorrow morning, before touching your phone, you place your hand over your heart and simply breathe for 1 minute. Maybe instead of immediately criticizing yourself in the mirror, you whisper, I am learning to love the person becoming visible here. Maybe when anxiety rises, instead of spiraling into fear, you pause and remind your body, I am safe in this moment. Maybe when life feels uncertain, you stop demanding immediate answers and begin trusting that clarity often arrives slowly. These tiny moments matter, sweetheart. They seem small, But repeated small moments create emotional identity. And emotional identity shapes the direction of your life. People often wait for giant breakthroughs while ignoring the quiet daily choices already transforming them. But your future is not created only through massive events. It is created through repeated energy, the energy of how you think, how you speak, how you love yourself, how you recover after setbacks, how you allow yourself to receive. Receiving, that word is important because many people know how to chase, struggle, overwork, and overgive, but they do not know how to receive. Receive help, receive love, receive rest, receive abundance, receive compliments, receive peace. Why? Because somewhere deep inside, they still feel undeserving. So let me ask you gently, what if life is not withholding from you? What if part of your healing journey is learning how to emotionally open your hands instead of clenching them tightly around fear? A clenched fist cannot receive, and emotionally, many people walk through life clenched, guarded, braced, defensive, suspicious of joy. But breakthroughs often require openness, not naive openness, not abandoning discernment, but the willingness to believe that goodness can exist for you too. That is why gratitude is so powerful. Not because you pretend painful things never happened, but because gratitude retrains the mind to notice what fear overlooks. A warm cup of tea, a quiet morning, a genuine conversation, a deep breath, a moment of laughter. The fact that your heart is still willing to hope after everything. These moments matter. Life is not only found in giant milestones. Sometimes healing begins when you finally allow ordinary moments to nourish you again. And maybe that has been missing for a long time. Maybe you have been rushing so hard towards some future version of happiness that you stopped fully inhabiting your present life. But sweetheart, your life is happening now. Not only when everything becomes perfect, not only when every dream arrives, not only when the fear disappears completely, now. And there is something sacred about deciding to meet yourself fully in the present moment, to stop postponing your worth, to stop postponing your joy, to stop postponing your peace. Because the truth is, life keeps moving. Days become years quietly, and I do not want you spending your precious existence waiting to finally feel alive someday. You deserve aliveness now. You deserve moments of beauty now. You deserve gentleness now. You deserve self-respect now. And perhaps that is the breakthrough hidden underneath everything else. Not becoming someone new, but finally giving yourself permission to exist as you truly are. Without endless apology, without shrinking, without abandoning your own soul for approval. Take another slow breath. Can you feel how much lighter life becomes when you stop fighting yourself constantly? When you stop waking up already at war with your own mind? That inner peace changes your entire energy. You begin making decisions from self-respect instead of desperation. You begin attracting differently because your standards change. You begin recognizing that not every closed door is rejection. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes it is life-clearing space for something more aligned. And I know uncertainty can still feel uncomfortable, but uncertainty is not always punishment. Sometimes uncertainty is simply the space where new realities are forming. A caterpillar probably believes everything is ending before becoming a butterfly. Transformation often feels like disorientation before it feels like freedom. So if your life feels uncertain right now, do not rush to label it failure. Maybe your old identity is dissolving. Maybe your inner world is rearranging itself. Maybe life is asking you to trust the unseen for a little while longer. Because not everything meaningful can be measured immediately. Love grows invisibly at first. Healing grows invisibly at first. Confidence grows invisibly at first. And your breakthrough, sweetheart, may already be unfolding beneath the surface in ways your current eyes cannot fully see yet. So tonight, I want you to stop demanding proof for just a moment. Stop interrogating your future. Stop punishing yourself for not being there yet. Stop speaking about your life as though it is already doomed. Instead, soften. Place your hand over your heart again. Breathe slowly. And repeat quietly within yourself, I trust that my life can change. I trust that healing is happening even when I cannot fully see it yet. I no longer need to rush my becoming. I release the belief that struggle is my identity. I am learning to live with openness instead of fear. I deserve peace. I deserve love. I deserve a life that feels aligned with my soul. And sweetheart, you do. You truly do. So as you leave this moment, I do not want you carrying pressure. I do not want you obsessing over becoming perfect overnight. I simply want you to remember this feeling. The feeling of returning to yourself, because this quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself, this gentle willingness to believe your life can become more beautiful than your past. This is the turning point, and from here, everything can begin to change.